Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to part two of the briefing for chapter 3 of the Pinkham book, Django Unleashed. So, in part 1, we kind of went through the content of the chapter that deals with building the model. Okay? And then starting here in section 3.6, we're going to test it by populating the database. But we're not going to do it the typical way that people do it in tutorials like this. The typical way to do it, and the way that I do it, is, and we did in the Django Girls tutorials, is we use the Django form editor capability of the Django admin app. Okay? And what Pinkham decides to do is, how about we use Python code to do this? And we learned some things about the API in Django to interact with the data model. And this is a great idea, but there's a lot of work here. So I just want to make sure that you know how to get all the parts going in order to get it done. First of all, he says that we should get to the point where we are on commit A06F in chapter 3, which is almost at the end. And so instead of saying that, I'm going to go and I'm going to roll forward on our code from the book, in the book's code repository. I'm just going to roll it right up to the end of chapter 3. Right now, you can see, I can see I'm at the end of chapter 2. Okay, so let's get to the end of chapter 3. So let's go to source tree and go to the book code. And as you can see, I'm here at the end of chapter 2, and I'm just going to go all the way to the end of chapter 3. So the last one, the one he told us to go to is this one here, and I'm just going to go one further. Okay, it's not very hard to do. And I'm going to reset the master to this commit, do the hard version, say OK, and there we go. Okay, so we've got that. And let's go back and look at our directories. This is the way I really like to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get my project, my PyCharm project, which is called SU Organizer. I'm going to get it in the same state that the book code is at the end of chapter 3. And for right here, what I can do is, I've tried a lot of other approaches, and they all have some defect or other. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the code that I have. And you'll notice that I didn't highlight these hidden folders. And there's a reason for that. The hidden folders are the metadata for the Git repository, which is not the same one on the left side and the right side. So we certainly don't want to get those mixed up. And the idea folder is the metadata for our PyCharm project, which we don't have on the left side. So we don't want to do that. But all the rest of the code here, if we had a current copy of the database, I would not delete that, but I don't have one, so I don't care. So I'm just going to move all those to the trash, and I'm just going to take all this code, and I'm going to move it over. I'm going to copy it over, not actually move it over. So I'm going to copy this, over to here. And so what I'm done is I've got the code in SU Organizer at the point where all the code that he's coded in for the model, it's all in there. Okay, and what's left is to test. Also, there's two other things in here that are going to be important to us. One is requirements.txt, which we're going to use to install the right version of Python packages into our virtual environment. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then once we get that going, we have a Jupyter notebook that we're going to use to actually keep from having to type in all that Python code that we're going to use to interact with the Django Python API for interacting with the model. Okay, so I gotta fix one thing, and I'll be ready to go. Be right back. Okay, I've got that done. So let's go take a look at the SU Organizer project in PyCharm. And one of the things you'll notice is all of a sudden we're seeing this banner bar telling us that we could install requirements. Okay, what's that mean? Well, it means that over here in our project, we now have a requirements.txt file that's been added since the last chapter. And this can be used as input to the Python package manager pip, which will install an older version of Django than we currently have, the debug toolbar, the extensions, and IPython notebook. And IPython notebooks are Jupyter notebooks. And that's what we're going to use in order to execute the code from the textbook to keep from having to type it in. So we want to install those requirements. And how do we know to do that? Well, the textbook says so. So let's take a look at that. So you can see the way we can do this at the command line is we can say pip install -r requirements.txt. And you know what? I'm just gonna copy and paste that because I can. So let's go back to our PyCharm project. Let's click on the terminal window. And the terminal window is not ready because it's not running. It's in the proper directory, but it's not running our virtual environment. So I need to say source activate E4. Our virtual environment is called E4 SU Organizer. And the exact command for Windows is on your Conda cheat sheet. So we see, okay, now we're in the right directory, and we have we have activated our virtual environment. That's good. And now I'm just going to paste in that code from the textbook. And what it's doing is it's running the pip Python installer utility. And what it's going to do is it's going to back down Python, and we'll take it from there. You know what's kind of funny is I had this happen before. I copy pasted this before, and for some reason I got, in addition to the text, I got this Pinkham Andrew. I don't know why that comes out, but we obviously didn't want that code to come with the copy paste. I don't think it's done any harm, but that's an odd thing to have happen. Okay, and if we say um, let's say conda list, it'll list the things that are in our current environment. So let's look for Django up at the top. And we see we have Django 1.8, which is what we want. And this is installed by pip. And there's still the vestiges of Django 1.11. But if we look a little bit higher before we did this, you'll see where it says that it successfully uninstalled with Django 1.11.8. So it's in our environment, but it's not active. And successfully installed Django 1.8.18. That's what we wanted. And there's a bunch of IPython stuff here too, so the notebooks are going to work. And that's what we want. Okay? All right, so we're part of the way done. We've done the requirements. We've got the packages that we need. Now let's go back to the textbook. And it says that it wants us to run the notebook. Now, the IPython, the Jupyter Notebook app is an app that runs a little web server, and then we get to interact with the notebook in a browser. And how do we start this? Well, unfortunately, this line of code in example 3.38 is not exactly right. It's telling us to run manage.py, but accidentally somebody typed in manager.py. But within manage.py, it wants us to run the shell plus command, and then it wants us to pass it a -- notebook. So we can do that. So let's go back to our project, and let's get a window for the manage.py task. So that's there. Okay. And since we copied over that stuff, it's a little upset about some of our code, but we're not going to worry about that quite yet. That's an anomaly that came from the copied code. But let's type help. Okay. Sorry. Let's just say help. I don't know why it says shell plus. We want to type in shell plus. So let's not type help. So shell plus, shell underscore plus, and then -- notebook. Okay? And return again. So the good thing about running this under this shell plus part of manage pi is it sets up the proper Django environment around the notebook. Okay? So if you don't start the Jupyter Notebook this way, if you start the Jupyter Notebook the way the way that you do it in the documentation on the website for Jupyter Notebooks, the code from the book won't run exactly as expected. So again, you do want to start it with the shell plus, but that's manage pi, not manager.py. And here's the notebook. Okay, we can see a lot of other files from our directory, so we're in the right directory, but it's only this that's a notebook. So we're going to click on that. It's going to open it up. And if this is your first introduction to notebook, notebooks are a nice way to document a workflow, okay, a sequence of code that you want to execute. So you can kind of intermix documentation and code, and you can leave it there for the user to execute as they go along. Generally speaking, what you do is you come to the code blocks that are numbered at this point, and you click in the gray area for the notebook, for the code block in the notebook, and you can see it gets a green highlight around it. And how do you execute that? You do that with Shift enter, or shift return. So shift enter, and I was expecting to get see the results from that. Oh, that doesn't have any outputs. It's just an import. So shift enter. Yeah, fine. That's good. Now, if you want to follow along from the textbook, this is pretty much line for line how it goes. So go to this, run it, go to the next one, run it, go to the next one, run it. So why it didn't like that, I forget. No such table organizer tag. Oh, you know what happened? We never created the database. Whoops. Let's go fix that. So, if we go back to Manage Pi for SU Organizer, and let's open that. Looks like we're going to have to kill this notebook and start again. So let's do this. Sorry about that, guys. Let's close the browser. Okay. And then let's kill this manage.py process by going down and getting the red X and killing it. Sometimes you have to kill it twice to get it really dead. Okay, no, that's dead. Okay, so what did we forget to do? We forgot to migrate the database because we don't have a database. Well, we might have a database, but it's not a proper database. So let's go up, Tools, run manage.py.task, and let's say make migrations, and then let's say migrate. Okay, so now we ought to be able to go and crank up the notebook, because when it went to find the database, it couldn't find it because we never created it. Okay, so within this, what is it that we want to do? We want to, let's go back to our text. We want to shell underscore plus dash dash notebook. Okay, let's do it. Shell underscore plus dash dash notebook. And enter again. And there we go. So now we're going to open the notebook again. And now when we get started, we shouldn't get into trouble. So again, let's, we don't have a new copy of the notebook. Let's get well, it's not going to hurt us. Just go to the first one and let's shift enter that one. And then let's just work our way down. We shouldn't get an error this time. That one's good. Okay. That one's good. And then the next one, let's shift return that one. That one worked. And then shift return the delete. That worked. And let's shift return that one. So this is a really good way. I'm not going to walk you all the way through this, but I just want to tell you that you should be able to walk all the way through this, just command after command after command. You should be able to look at the data, look at the textbook, right? Textbook looking like this. And pretty much the code that we're putting in here is the same stuff that you have in the notebook, okay? Except that the textbook has the play-by-play for what exactly we're trying to do, what part of the API we're trying to learn and to demonstrate. Okay, and then the code for that is going to be in your notebook. And pretty much it should go all the way through without an error. Okay, so you're going to get all the way down to the bottom and you're going to be done. Okay, so a couple of things should have happened when you get to the bottom. One is that you've had a good kind of tour of the API for interacting with the model. But the other thing is you've done some population of your database. Okay, so if you skip this, you're going to have a database that's unpopulated. So that's probably not something that you want. And given the fact that there's only 51 of these, I think that you can probably take the time to do it. Okay, so that's it. That's all we wanted to do with chapter 3. In the coding assignment that we have, which is called the model coding assignment, we build our own data model for our own application, and we populate it using the admin app for the form editor. So we don't use this exact approach. And so, we learn a little bit more there too. So that's it for chapter 3. On to the coding assignment, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.